Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Ramiz. I work for ICNA Council for Social Justice. And this is Lena. She was on the trip with us to Palestine that we were blessed to go to a few weeks ago. We were supposed to have 3 more individuals to come, but they couldn't make it. One of them is sick. The other one had to cancel at the last minute. There will be one other person joining us soon, hopefully, inshallah. So once he comes, he'll join the conversation as we go. So a few weeks ago, myself and about 30 of us, I think, we took a trip to Palestine, and we had a really great experience. And today we just want to share what happened, that trip, and why we feel it's important to reflect on the trip and what we learned and all the lessons that came about. So that's what this webinar is about. So we hope that you sit with us throughout this whole conversation, hopefully no more than 35 to 45 minutes. And then from there, you can share it with your friends and your family and go take it from there, inshallah. Is there anything you want to add, Lina? You want to introduce yourself first? Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Lina Ghannam. I'm Palestinian and Syrian. I'm a graphic designer. I'm a professor at the Corcoran School of Arts and Design at George Washington University. And I am the creative director of the DC Palestinian Film and Arts Festival, which is coming up very soon at the beginning of October.
Is there a website people can go to check that out?
Yeah, dcpfaf.org.
Okay.
You should come check it out if you're in the DC area. It's great.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So please do definitely check that out. She does great work, and you'll definitely see it on the website as well. So there are a lot of things that happened, and obviously in this hour we can't cover everything, but there are a few things that we wanted to cover. The first thing is the entry into Israel that we went to. So I had never been to Israel before. I think it was your first time as well.
My first time.
And you're Palestinian, right?
And I'm Palestinian.
Yeah. So it was her first time, my first time as well, even though I'm not Palestinian, but I wanted to learn what was happening. So my motivation for going was to actually see for my own eyes what was actually happening there, because you read a lot in the news and the media, but sometimes you don't know, you doubt things, or you hear, contradictions. So I wanted to see for myself how much of what the media portrays or what's actually happening or what we're told is happening is actually true versus what's actually just fictional. So that was my motivation to go. What was your motivation?
My motivation was really just to honor my grandmother, actually, who passed last summer. And, a big part of our relationship was talking about Palestine and just her recounting the stories of the time when she was living there and she had her children there. And so when she passed, it dawned on me a few months later that I really wanted to go and honor her and honor those stories and my heritage by making that journey for both of us.
Okay, alhamdulillah. And by the way, we also have some pictures from the event. You can find it in the information and the information details for this video. You should be able to there's a link that I provided in there, and you can check out all the pictures that we've taken from the event as well. Then once we got into Israel, so all of us did immediately get held over. We were all asked to go to a waiting room, where we were for about 7 hours. Of those, I think about 5 hours, they just made us wait, not do anything. We just sat there for 5 hours waiting, not knowing what was going to happen. And we were just waiting for them to either release us or deport us, or whatever that they're going to do. So we were just waiting for about 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours. And then finally, they individually asked each of us questions. Did you get any questions, particularly like invasive questions that you were asked?
It wasn't so much the questions, which didn't bother me so much, asking who my grandparents are and that kind of thing. But it is kind of the approach. For me, I'm privileged because I consider myself lucky to not have been traumatized the way that I know some of the other folks on our delegation were treated. But it was really just the manner, the demeanor, the kind of this. There's almost like like a surveillance kind of a feeling where you felt like people were watching you that weren't in the room. They're standing over there. It was almost like a performance of some kind.
Right.
So it was really that. I was not prepared in that I didn't know what to expect, but it didn't throw me either, right? I don't know. I kind of I felt lucky that I didn't get the worst of it. So I'm just sorry that some people who were with us did have a very, very difficult time being questioned.
Right. So just to give you an example, so this was basically a delegation of people from different faiths and some even of non-faith. So we had some Jews in our groups as well, some Christians, and some of the Jews that were cast aside, they were basically some of them were told, like, we can't believe you're Jewish, for example, that you're here with this group in this interfaith setting, coming here, talking about peace and whatever, right? Trying to figure out what we're really up to, So, and even one of them was told, like, I think maybe your dead grandfather is probably looking down on you, is ashamed of you. I mean, he's a Jewish person who was with us, in our group. So this type of language was being used individually in private rooms. So these are not like, regular people. These are immigration officers at their airport in Tel Aviv that are speaking in this, really invasive manner and very in a ridiculing manner. And so this was our introduction to Israel, or so just imagine what we were thinking, that okay, so far you can check off the list that it is really pretty bad here, that we thought it's just as bad as people say, that it is really bad, especially if they suspect that you're there for some sort of mission, peace mission, or trying to figure out social justice mission,
Anything
or
good.
some activism, or trying to figure out what Israel is really up to. Is there really racism? Is there really, is there really, social justice issues related to Palestinian rights and their lands, and whether they're taking it or not, which they are, by the way, and we'll get to that as well. So it was really interesting to see all of that.
I do want to, can I just interject with
please.
one thing?
Yes.
It's really difficult to say with words to people the experience and have them understand it fully. That's something that it's been, unless I'm talking to someone who's had the experience of going through Ben Gurion Airport, it's very difficult to convey how shocking it was, and how unnatural it felt, and how it's not like any other kind of, process that you would go through in any other travel destination. Sometimes we're questioned, whatever, customs, and we all know what that feels like, but this is different, and it's really difficult to use words to express the feeling. And I think that might not be, I don't know, that might not be just me.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. Yes, you're absolutely right. So after the airport, so this is just at the airport. We haven't even entered the country yet. We're just still sitting and waiting at the airport. So after entry, so what happened at the end was basically two people from our groups, they were immediately deported. No explanation was given. Okay, they just deported them. And everyone else, they basically made us all sign a paper saying that we will not visit any Palestinian territories. We will only stay within the Israeli, controlled areas only. So just, people, things like Jerusalem, for example, or what was the other ones?
Tel Aviv.
Haifa. Yeah, they wanted us to stay away from anywhere where the Palestinian authorities are, controlling land. So that they made. Otherwise, there was in the form that they made a sign that said, otherwise you'll be banned for 10 years from coming back to Israel if we find out that you violate these rules. So that was the paper that was given to us, and before actually being allowed to go into the country. So after that, we left. We came to our hotel. So one of the purposes of the trip was to basically meet up with Israeli as well as Palestinian social justice activists on the ground that are trying to end the occupation. That was the reason. Is there something you want to add?
I just wanted to give context that we left the airport at 5 a.m.
Yes. We got there around what time?
I think it was like 7 or 9. I don't remember, but I remember we left in the middle, like late in the middle of the night. And so when
Yeah.
you're saying, and then we left the airport.
Yeah, I literally prayed
So it
Fajr
was-
outside and then got on the bus to go back to the hotel.
Yeah, it was that was part of what made it so
Yeah.
so shocking and difficult, is
Yeah.
that we were in the middle of the night having to go to a
Right.
hotel.
Just imagine 7 to 8 hours, no questions, just sitting there, just waiting for them to see what they're going to do with us. So as you can imagine, how much stressful that may have been. So after we actually came into, we have one more person. But Saif is here. He also went to the trip with us. Sit here. I'll be sitting here. So just sit here.
Okay, no problem.
Just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Saif Rahman, Director of Public Government Affairs at Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center.
So
And
basically-
Ramiz gave me the wrong address.
So sorry, I had no. I was wondering where you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
So we were basically talking about the entry. So we just finished discussing the entry. What happened? Is there something specific you want to share about the entry?
I mean, I just think that the system is designed to basically try to prevent as many people as possible that have any care about justice and rights to enter. And I think that's, if I was to say something, that's the one thing I would say. Because, why would you care that a bunch of people who care about Palestinians or want to meet with Palestinians are wanting to come to Israel?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So after that, basically, so we were allowed to go into the country eventually, and then after we came, so we met with our first activists, Feroz, right? Feroz. And she pointed some things out to us. So our main hotel was in Jerusalem, and she pointed something out to me, which she told me this, I couldn't stop, comparing this. And she kept talking about how East Jerusalem, which is under Palestinian control, and West Jerusalem, which is under Jewish control, where most of the Jewish population is, how they're so different. So basically all the Palestinians are restricted to the east side of Jerusalem, and all of the non-Jewish people are on the west side, and how different it is. Like, you can actually see there are only a few blocks of difference. Our hotel was literally on the border, and there's only a few blocks of difference, but they're so different technologically, the way they look, the way it's designed, all the good work, and all the renovations are happening in West Jerusalem. There's nothing happening in East Jerusalem. It was just so vividly clear. Like, you would literally you can feel the difference. You walk into West Jerusalem, it looks like 21st, you're in the Western world, for example, right? And you go to the Eastern, and the trash is there, nothing's being picked up properly. The people are more congested together. There's more pollution. It just feels really different. You can really see the difference, even though you just walk a few blocks. So that to me was very shocking, and she was telling us basically that this is by design. So Israel by design doesn't give enough public resources to East Jerusalem, and focuses all on West Jerusalem. And part of the reason is to drive Palestinians out of East Jerusalem, so that eventually they can have all of the Jerusalem to themselves. So that's what I remember from her.
And just to give context to Feroz, she is part of an organization called Grassroots Jerusalem, who are doing really important work within Jerusalem itself to combat the occupation, and actually they're always looking for funders and donors. So if you're someone who's interested in contributing, that's a great way to do it. Grassroots Jerusalem.
The other part of that, Ramiz, is even in the old city. It's interesting that walking in the old city, within the old city walls, you have the Muslim quarter, you have the Christian quarter, you have the Jewish quarter, and then you have the Armenian section. But it's interesting that when we crossed from the Jewish quarter, which was, you could tell it was all these air-conditioned areas, and it was really nicely kept. I mean, we literally crossed a little alleyway, which couldn't have been more than 5 feet wide. And as soon as you made that cross into that new area, you noticed that the trash hadn't been picked up. And the guide told us immediately, oh, well, we just crossed into the Muslim quarter, whereas, and this was about 1 o'clock at the time, or 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whereas all the trash had been picked up in the other parts, the Muslim quarter, the trash wasn't picked up and it was strewn on the sidewalks and in the places that it was supposed to have been picked up.
And it's interesting because the taxes in Jerusalem are astronomical, and part of the taxes that people pay, whether they're Jewish or Palestinian, Muslim, Christian, whatever, is for things like trash collection. And so I was speaking to our guide and I mentioned kind of, aren't you paying the same taxes? And he said, no, I mean, those are the taxes and that's what they're technically for, but we call this the occupation tax, right? It's the tax for being Palestinian
Right.
in occupied Jerusalem. So basically the money that they pay doesn't even cover the services that money is meant for.
What he said was that we go and pay the tax before it's due.
Right,
Because if we don't do that, we're not considered residents of the city.
right,
And they will take away our residency, whereas members who are Israeli, Jewish Israelis, Israeli Jews, would not try to avoid paying the tax or don't
Right.
have to worry because they're not going to have their residency stripped of them if they didn't pay a tax or they weren't there in their house, whatnot. It reached to the point where the tax collectors apparently even go into the houses and they would check to see if you have milk in the refrigerator or laundry to show that you're actually living there. And what that reminded me of was the Inquisition in Spain, because the Inquisition in Spain, if you visit southern Spain, especially Granada, there are places up in the mountains where they have sheets over the doors. And I asked why. And they said that the inquisitors should be able to open at any time, look inside, and make sure you weren't praying.
Right.
This was back in, the Inquisition time.
Right.
So the fact that, they go into the house and check for milk, and it just reminded me so much of, the Inquisition, the pogroms of,
Right.
Spain at that time.
Yes. So those who may not know who are watching, so in Jerusalem, basically, Palestinians don't have a citizenship status within the city. They're called. They have something called the permanent residency status, right? So it's something that can be it can be taken from them anytime if they violate any rule, any law, or if they cannot prove that they live in Jerusalem. So constantly, every 10 years, I think they were saying, or was it every year?
I think it's constant, and I don't think it's just that they have to prove that they live in Jerusalem.
Right.
They have to prove that Jerusalem is the center of their life.
Yes, that's
That's exactly what it is.
Which is a much different thing than living in Jerusalem. They have to prove that Jerusalem is their everything,
Right.
which is why I say referred to the milk. If there's no milk in your refrigerator, then how can Jerusalem be the center of your life? We're revoking your permit. It's another type of displacement.
And they kick you out and they take over your residence. So even if you're living there for generations on end and you've been there for generations, you can be just kicked out just like that if Jerusalem is not the center of your attention according to Jewish law. And again, this only applies to the Palestinians.
law.
I'm sorry, yes, Israeli laws.
Very important
Excuse me,
distinction.
yes. According to the Israeli laws. So this is only restricted to the Palestinians. That's it. So again, this is just an effort to kick them out. And I think he was told us 30,000 Palestinians, was it, that were kicked out last year from
Something
Jerusalem?
like that.
So a very high number of Jerusalemites who, because something happens, maybe they lost a job, or maybe something happened, or maybe it has some sort of a, very minimal violation. They'll immediately strip their permanent residency status, and they'll basically kick them out of the city.
And add to that, I'm sorry, Lena, if you want to say something, but add to that, if you get married from someone who is from outside of Jerusalem, they will not grant them residency status. So you have to make a choice at that point whether you want to marry someone from outside of Jerusalem, because they won't be allowed into Jerusalem, and you won't be able to be with your husband or wife or whatever it is. Yeah.
So just imagine that. That's the type of tactics that the Israeli government is taking to just strip the land from the Palestinians. So this was just a part of what we, picked up. And there was far more.
I just want to add to that. So one of the things the thing that really I took away the most from the trip, I learned the the multi-layered kind of tactics, to use your word, at displacement. So I thought displacement before I went was a very literal, we're going to demolish your home or we're going to kill you, that kind of displacement, or threaten you with death. But displacement trickles down to even these really kind of seemingly innocuous laws, right? Of like, oh, well, you can't park your car here. You don't have a permit to park your car here. Do it a few times and they take away your permanent residency. You are displaced. And so I think Jerusalem was a really big lesson in how displacement works on many levels.
As part of that displacement, it even applies to the religious sites. So the only religious site that we saw that the religious community wasn't in charge of was Al-Aqsa. All of the Christian religious sites, the Christian groups managed all of the details around it, the access and everything associated with it. The only site that existed in Jerusalem was Al-Aqsa, where you had Israeli guards at the gates, and they are the ones that can check you and harass you and decide whether you go into Al-Aqsa or don't go into Al-Aqsa. And they've also taken over one gate, it's called Al-Buraq Gate, the Western Gate, that's next to the Buraq Wall, the Western Wall, or the quote-unquote Wailing Wall. And they now are allowing tourists through that wall. Even tourism, religious tourism that's associated with Al-Aqsa has become a tool of occupation and displacement, as Lena mentioned. I mean, it's so insidious because it's like, well, the one time that we were there to pray Jum'ah, the Friday prayer, they decided that they were going to attack the mosque, the masjid, while the congregants were still making their sunnah after Jum'ah prayer. And basically, when they decided to do that, the decision was they were going to close the masjid. So they actually bolted up and chained the doors of the Masjid al-Aqsa. And I want people to actually go back in history and look at how many times that has happened to any Christian, Jewish, or other religious sites, or the Mormons, for example. The LDS Church has a big, compound that has been granted by Israel. How many other religions have had their religious sites attacked and shut down by the Israeli authorities in the last 50 years?
That's a very good point to think about. Before I go further, do you want to talk about that little incident you had with the guard one of the days? So as he said, Asif said that basically the Israeli guards surround Al-Aqsa and you have to go through them. So they can stop anyone at any time. They will definitely stop Palestinians. Luckily, we had American passports that were always allowed to go in through. But usually Palestinians have a very difficult time, especially if they're young. They have a very difficult time to even go and pray in Al-Aqsa, even though they live like
under
10 minutes
50,
away.
I think you're not allowed to go pray if you're from outside if you're not a resident of Jerusalem.
Right. So it's very difficult. So we had one incident during one of these visits to Al-Aqsa. So you go ahead and say tell us what happened. By the way, we witnessed this all with our eyes. It happened right before our eyes.
So this was, I think it was Friday morning, if I'm not mistaken. We were going to make our salah, and we try to just avoid eye contact with these guys going in because some of them are just nasty as you try to enter the masjid. So we were walking by, and one of them decided he wanted to call me, and I just ignored him and kept walking. And he didn't say anything after that, but his other partner, or the other soldier that was with him, decided that he was gonna take up my cause, I guess. So he said, he stopped me and he said, come here. I said, well, I'm standing right here. You can talk to me right here. You're standing here. He's like, no. He insisted that I walk back 10 feet, whatever it was, just to show that he has domination and he has the authority and the ability to tell me where he wants me to go. And it was clearly basically an act to show that, look, I control. I'm the one that decides who goes in and who doesn't go in. So he said, where are you from? I said, America. And then he couldn't say anything after that. So he starts flipping through the passport. I could hear him actually cursing me in Hebrew. The one that pushed me. He was sitting there talking to his partner, cursing me. And I said, yeah, I can hear you cursing me, back at you too. And then he just said, have a nice day, after this scenario. So one of our colleagues was standing closer to the door, and he said, I hope you don't have a nice day. And we just walked in. But I mean, it was clearly just to show I've got authority, that I can control whether you Muslim can go pray in this masjid or not. And that's basically it. I mean, we saw many communities. So we saw Turks, for example, who were stopped, and they would demand that they leave a passport with them at the gate in order for them to go make their prayers. Of one of the group members, we saw Palestinians who weren't allowed at all to go, and they were just literally turned back. And if you can imagine this, you are coming to pray in the third holiest site in Islam, and you literally at the gate you can see the Qubba, you can see the Haram al-Sharif at this gate, and only to be told, no, you're not praying here, go turn around. I mean, it's a demoralizing thing to do, and I think it's intentional the way that it's done.
Now I want to quickly shift focus on our next. So after that, we were meeting with different people, different activists, and visiting different cities, different sites. So I want to focus on the next point is the Tent of Nations a little bit, which is a very interesting story. Lena, do you want to tell them about what it is, since you spent maybe more time than us with them?
Well, I unfortunately was not able to spend more time at the Tent of Nations because the Zionist regime did not want me to, so I had to leave. But that's besides the point right now. The Tent of Nations is basically it's born of a family farm that has existed in the area of Bethlehem since the Ottoman period. And it's been owned by the same family, the Dawood family, who are really wonderful, because we got to spend one night there. And
Palestinian Christians.
They're Palestinian Christians, right? And they basically, after 1948, the land has slowly been, there's been a tremendous amount of land theft, particularly in the Bethlehem area, regardless of the fact that it's supposed to be Palestinian land. And so this is a farm and a family who have resisted the Israeli government from taking their land for the last, I don't know how many years they've been fighting, maybe 30 or 40 years in the court system. And because they have papers, documentation of their land ownership, dating back to the Ottoman period. I think they have like four.
So they have the Ottomans, they have the Hashemites, because they controlled it, and they also have the nascent Israeli Authority.
Right. So they've got, thank you. Yeah. I did not have that much memory of it. And so because of that, they've been able to retain control. However, retaining control over their presence on the land is much different than retaining control of what they can do with the land. They are surrounded by settlements on all sides that look really ordered and funded and active from where you stand. It's such a beautiful location. But on the Dawood farm at the Tent of Nations, they are not allowed to develop or enhance any aspect of their operation. They have experienced a tremendous amount of violence in the past, trees uprooted, just threats, constant threats. And so they began to invite volunteers to come and help them with the land and with kind of maintaining the farm work, because they have a very difficult time maintaining an income based on what they're able to do with their crops. Because often, as we heard, their crops are often maybe, they're forced to throw them out or not able to sell them or that kind of thing. But to the point of, I think Amal mentioned a water cistern that they had wanted to collect rainwater, but they were asked to tear that down or demolish that because every so often Israeli planes fly overhead and monitor any changes in their land and threaten them with an order for demolition on all of their land. So it's a constant struggle having to abide by the rules of the Israeli government, which is their tactic, is to do what they ask, but then also find a way to resist and survive and maintain their presence and their farmland. It's really a powerful place.
And a beautiful place.
And it's so beautiful. Yeah. And I really wanted to stay longer, but I wasn't able to. And that's okay. I'll be back. I'll go back.
You can imagine, if you can imagine Bethlehem or Beit Lahem, and you have hilltops. And one of those hilltops, or the last remaining Palestinian hilltop, is this family's hilltop.
Yeah. Right.
And they have had 12,000 trees destroyed.
Is it 12,000?
Yeah, 12,000 olive trees cut down. They are not allowed to have any water on the site, no electricity on the site.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to have permanent structures on the site. And yet you see the buildings in the settlements, right, that are literally just across the valley, because you're on a hilltop and you can look out to the other hilltops and see the settlements that are there.
The main road connecting them to Bethlehem was blocked off by boulders in order to force them to drive. Anyone who wants to go there all the way around, it kind of doubles the travel time to the city. It's harassment, really. I mean, on a very basic level, we could call it just straight up harassment, in order to just get them to get fed up and leave. But they won't.
They were pretty innovative. So no electricity. He put in solar power.
Well, it was actually a gift from, I think, a German organization.
Yeah.
Or a group. I don't want to be mistaken, but it was a gift when, I think, as a result of some press coverage that they had.
So no water, they put in the cistern. No sewer. They're like, okay, we're gonna do compost toilets.
Right.
So it was.
They make it happen.
And the craziest thing is when they went to court and they had all these documents. I think they said the judge was the one that told them, or
a lawyer.
Or a lawyer told them, well, I have a document more important than that. I have God's decree. So saying that they have this land.
I have God's word or something. I have like the word of God tells me that this is my land. Yeah. And I think the lawyer for the Dawoods, for the family, said, well, do you have a paper with God's decree on it? Because I have a paper. Yeah. And so the court recognized the actual proof, the document that they had. And so it's an ongoing struggle. So if anyone's out there watching and thinking, how can I help? tentofnations.org. They go volunteer, make that trip. It's worth it. Reach out, show just support just by communicating. I'm sure they have things for sale, olive oil, something, I'm sure. So it would be always a good thing.
Great figs.
Great figs, fruit growing all over the place.
Great grapes, yeah.
So it would be great if you could support them if you have the ability to do that.
So just check them out, tentofnations.org.
I believe that's the one.
Okay, if not, you can just Google it, the website and the information about them, what they do, and the type of work they've done. It should pop up, inshallah. The next thing I wanted to talk about is Hebron, which I think was very interesting. And its story is very interesting. So Hebron is a city in Palestine, and it's like everything else is occupied. But one thing that makes it different, makes it stand out, is that it's a place where some of the most extreme Israeli settlers live, and they harass Palestinians below. And it's the people there are beautiful. I love the shopkeepers, for example, so humble, still very optimistic. But the settlers there are just horrific, monsters, even almost. No, actually, rather, they are monsters. They treat them completely like garbage. So if you go to Hebron and you go to the marketplace, so they have these cages that you're basically on top of them. And the reason for those cages is because the Israeli settlers that live on top, they constantly, on purpose, throw trash, urine, sometimes even puke, whatever thing they can down into the street on purpose, just to harass the shopkeepers and the marketplace. And it's because of that, one of the shopkeepers was saying that people have started coming less because they're always afraid something's going to fall on them. So they have these cages to protect themselves below from being harassed in this way. So I thought that was there was a lot of other stuff that they shared as well. I want to get into it as well. But is there anything particular that you guys remember or you want to point out about Hebron?
Well, for me, it was walking along the abandoned marketplace, the original marketplace, the Shuhada,
Sure.
Shara Shuhada, or the Martyrs Street. This was a very lively, thriving marketplace full of just like it felt so. It's actually a little emotional just even thinking about it. You could see that this was a place that had life, that had something very special, and it has been completely kind of not just shut down, not just blocked off, but kind of obliterated in front of your face. And it's almost like they leave it there as like a sign of, hey, this is what's coming for you. This is what you have here as a Palestinian. You have nothing. You have shadows of a history. You have bones. You have dust. And it was really powerful just to walk down that street. And you have to walk down it in order to, I guess you don't have to, but we did walk down it in order to access the smaller marketplace that's now still in operation. But it's devastating. It's devastating because there wasn't a war there. There wasn't something that happened in order to kind of, there are still people who live in that space. They're just not allowed to fix anything or build anything or sell anything. Shara al-Shuhada is a place, it's an emblem of the dehumanization that's happening, I think, Bil Khalil, Hebron. It's just a really it's a visceral experience seeing that, and then seeing the people like Ramiz is saying, who are lovely, who have joy, who are kind of who joke and play and are serious at the same time, and who have all of the awareness in the world and very intelligent. And they're right there, and they have to live it. It's almost like torture having to see that this is the intent for them, but at the hands of the Israeli government.
It's there's a Palestinian joke that the people of Khalil are very hard-headed, right? And that to me represents ayah in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَفَسَدَتِ الْأَرْضِ. That if it weren't for the people that rub against each other, or that compete with one another, or that work with one another, then the earth would go bad. And it represents, Khalil is the representation of that for me, because you have the worst settlers, and those worst settlers are literally being stopped by the most hard-headed Palestinians, and the ones that live life continually, even under the most difficult of circumstances. And this was a representation of that for me. But the fact that you have to walk through a prison bar, literally a prison gate, in order to get into the market, was the manifestation of, that we want to control and be in charge, right? The other part of that was the irony of the story of a little girl that we met, and her father, who was a merchant. She was sleeping. Her father and his brother still own one of the higher apartments in Al Khalil, or the buildings, and the settlers are trying to kick them out. So she was sleeping next to the window, and one of the settlers threw a bottle, which broke and cut her face. At another time, one of them tried to jump over a fence to come and kill the family. And the irony was that he got stuck coming over the fence, and this Palestinian brother goes to save this settler who's about to fall and die, who's trying to come kill his family. And I just thought, that was hugely ironic, right? This guy's coming to kill your family, and instead of letting him fall and getting blamed,
Yep.
because, if he had fallen, he would get blamed for it, he had to go save this person who was coming to kill
Right.
his family. And Al Khalil is important also because Hebron, because it has the Haram al Ibrahimi, the Masjid al Ibrahimi, where and it's called the tomb of the patriarchs, where Ibrahim alayhi salam and the immediate family, right, Ishaq and Yaqub, are supposedly buried or have some remembrance. But it's also significant because it has the last remaining mimbar of Salahuddin. The original mimbar that Salahuddin placed, there were two of them. One of them was in Al-Aqsa, and it was burned down by an Israeli, an Australian, actually, Zionist in the 60s. And this was the last remaining intricate mimbar left from the days of Salahuddin.
Yeah, no, I remember. Alhamdulillah. Well, by the way, one other thing about the story that Saif was sharing earlier about the little girl, about the family that was about to be killed by the settler. So while he was going over the fence trying to kill the family, there were hundreds of, the local guide was telling us there were like hundreds of settlers on the ground, basically just saying, just looting, they're basically encouraging him on and clapping and whistling and telling him, yeah, go ahead and do it. By the way, if you go on YouTube and search Hebron settlers, you can actually find a video of how extreme these settlers are and the type of activities and the harassments that they put on the people of Hebron or the Palestinians that live there. So it's so just check that out after the video.
Funded from here.
Yeah, and it's all funded from the US. Which is, so our tax dollars are paying for all of this. And I remember also the local guide was telling us that sometimes it's so bad that sometimes the ambulances cannot even come into Hebron because settlers actually stand in front of the ambulance, preventing it from going to the patient, and they won't let them pass through. And the ambulance is forced sometimes to leave the city. And he said if any settler is damaged or hurt in any way, then automatically you can either get shot because you're not allowed to touch the settlers in any way. You cannot harm them. You cannot put your hands on them. You cannot defend yourself against them. So it's all under the protection of the Israeli military. All of these activities are happening under the protection of the Israeli military. So just imagine how difficult life is to live in that context.
And there's one other thing that happens that we didn't actually see, but that happens on a weekly basis. So if just to build the picture, so there's a small marketplace, right? It's like narrow and shops on both sides with that fencing that Ramiz referenced. And the reason is because so Israeli settlers are taking the living they're not really like apartment buildings, they're older, right? So they're clustered together, and so Israeli settlers live above and the market is below, and it's almost like it snakes through. So every week settlers from the surrounding settlements march through the marketplace, guided by soldiers, birthright participants. When they come, if they ever get to Hebron, sometimes will go through that marketplace as like, this is all yours. This is for you. This will be for you. But the settlers specifically march through the marketplace every single week to remind the Palestinians and to reassure themselves that they're dominant and that this is temporary, that the presence of Palestinians is temporary. It's really just it's shocking that to think that there is such a large group of people, meaning the settlers, who have divorced any kind of humanity from their daily life. They've kind of been able to just say, oh, okay, this is okay. This is ordained by God. And totally just disregard the fact that what they're doing is probably one of the biggest sins in any religion.
And don't forget the Israeli soldier who warned our Jewish brothers and sisters that
Oh,
were
yeah.
with us that,
Oh, yeah.
you could die. You
Yeah,
know,
it's not safe for you.
It's not
Don't go
safe
in
for you.
there.
They'll kill you.
Right. I also remember last thing about Hebron is I remember the guy that was leading, the local guy that was showing us around. He told us that there were at least 30 shops that were shut down in Hebron, and this was their family's main source of income. So 30 families' shops were shut down in Hebron, so the settlers can make a basketball
The
court for their
gold
kids.
market,
It was
the
the gold
whole
market.
gold market.
The whole gold
The
market
gold market.
Yeah.
was shut down by Israelis, the Israeli government, so the settlers can make a basketball court for their kids who are living
Above
there
it.
illegally in the first place, right? And so, and he was saying that a lot of these people that their shops were shut down, that was their main source of income for their family.
Yeah.
So just imagine that, forced to shut down your own shops just so just so an illegal occupant can have a basketball court for their kids, right? So I thought that was
Yeah.
terrible.
It's truly suffocating.
Yes.
They're sitting on top of the Palestinian population quite literally. And they just keep moving in, and you see spray paint and flags in Hebrew, which I asked what was written on them, and you know, things like "this is ours," you know, "this belongs to us," just like staking claim of other people's homes and property. You know, they displace them, and then a month later, Israelis move in, and they're right in the middle of a Palestinian community,
Yeah.
and they're very antagonistic. It's not like they're moving in and minding their own business. They're moving in and sitting out front with guns. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's suffocating.
Yeah.
I feel for the
Do you
people
want to
there.
talk about Lifta? Because that was something.
Yeah, yeah. So my next point was, if there's anything else you wanted to, before we talk about the exit, if there's anything else you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I really want to talk about Lifta, because Lifta was just a very surreal experience. And Lifta is essentially a Palestinian village, which is on the outskirts of Al-Quds, Jerusalem. And its lands actually extend from inside Al-Quds to Lifta. So people from Lifta actually still live in Al-Quds, and these were their farmlands and their other lands that were there. And they were expelled in 1948. And what was interesting for me was my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, is actually originally from there, and apparently his grandmother is buried, or I think his grandparents were buried in the graveyard that's next to the masjid there. But what was surreal was this abandoned village, which you can still see the houses, you can still see that there were people that occupied this. The house was there, and the houses were still intact, and Israel had declared this a national park,
Right.
and we saw a bunch of Orthodox Israelis having picnics amongst abandoned houses of people who used to live there,
Right.
and swimming in one of the last remaining springs that exists. And to me, the analogy that came to mind that I could think about was, if you can imagine someone going to Auschwitz and having a picnic at Auschwitz. I mean, that's essentially what that was. You kill people, you expel people, and then you go on top of that and have a picnic where you have done a crazy crime, a crime that is unconscionable. And that was just surreal to me.
Yeah, they bring their children there.
Yeah.
Which was even more difficult
Right.
for me to see children who don't know, who can't know at certain young ages, but that their parents bring them there, and there's so much just levity, and it's very clear that something terrible happened here, because the homes are quite beautiful. These are not homes that people just abandoned. These are not homes that are in disrepair because they're shoddy or because no, it's
They're
clear.
still nicely intact. They're big houses.
It's clear that something terrible happened here, and they call it a nature reserve, actually. And I remember that because it's really quite beautiful. There's fig trees and cactus, and it's just so beautiful. And then if you look inside of the more dense vegetation, that's where they dump their garbage.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, nature reserve. Okay, people who claim to love this land. Wow, you can't literally just garbage everywhere, and it's just telling of the story that I think they sell themselves, and it's really difficult to keep a straight face and not get angry going through Lifta.
And you definitely get I know we were getting a lot of dirty looks from the Israelis
yeah.
that were there because we were doing a tour through this area. And we were getting a lot of dirty looks from
one of them started chanting something.
Yeah. Yes.
Palestinians don't go there.
Yeah.
And so it's I love that tour guide.
Yeah.
He was like, we're gonna walk right through here. It was like walking through a snake pit.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting.
I was like, are you sure? I know. He's like, of course we're walking through here.
And I think he also told us that sometimes he's harassed, but he's so used to it now. He's just like, I have a response for anything that they bring up. So he's used to it. He's been doing it for years. But he proudly goes there and tells, like, these guys are swimming in the background, right? And having a picnic. And he's like outside telling the Palestinian story of what happened here and how they were massacred and slaughtered in this land, or in this very area. And how to get the homes. And we still have history here and things like that. So it was a very great experience for all of us. I know earlier, Lina, you said you wanted to bring up something as well.
It just the experience that stuck with me so much. I don't know. I think back to it so often. Was our visit to the Tasha refugee camp, and there's nothing about it that's remarkable or different than any other refugee camp. And a friend that was good. Yeah. That was Aida.
Was Aida? Yeah, you're right. That was Aida. Yeah, you're right.
But a friend of mine asked me. She said, "Well, are these refugees? Are they Palestinians? Are they refugees?" And I said, "Well, yeah, they're refugees. They can't go back to their villages. So all of these camps are refugee camps, and they're not different than one another." But I think the people in Tasha were, I don't know, of a different kind of resilience that I hadn't seen face to face yet. There's just something about the energy in the air. It's not anything that I can put a lot of words to, but the one story that I think we can all agree, which was very touching and extremely emotional for me personally, we're being taken through the neighborhood by a young man who has grown up there, and we stop in a little clearing. It's a very tight, tiny, passageway throughout the neighborhood, and we stop in this clearing, and he's speaking to us as a group, and we're a large group, and it's clear that we're not from there. And a young man comes, and he's holding a big round of bread, like Arabic bread. And he hands it to Izzuddin, one of our leaders, and he said, "This is from my mom."